Today, we're tackling why rent is so high in this country and how we got to this point.
We're living in a Wild West situation.
I moved here from Los Angeles, and if you had told me at that time that I would be paying LA rent prices in Calgary, I would have thought you were delusional.
Bidding wars are driving up rent hundreds of dollars.
A lot of us are on fixed incomes.
I'm looking for another rental unit, which I guarantee will be $500 to $1,000 more than what I'm paying today.
Vacancy rates below 1% in most of the major cities in the province.
Everything's being snatched up so quickly, and people are essentially desperate.
So let's just sit with this for a second. Average rent, taking all types of housing in Canada into account, topped $2,000 a month by the end of last year. $2,000. Like that's staggering. Right? And I still remember the good old days when you could rent a small place for like a few $100 in a major city every month. So today, we're going to try and figure out what is going on. So, in the last year, we have seen the cost of rent soar in the country. And yes, everything, not just rent, is more expensive right now. But inflation is sitting at 6.8%. The price of rent is outpacing it by a lot. Rent up 12% year over year, and up 5% just in the last couple of months. I mean, take a look. The capital cities where rent is outpacing inflation. But it gets worse than that. I mean, consider, the rental cost of an average one-bedroom unit. Calgary and Halifax, opposite sides of the country, both up 18%. And in Halifax, that's almost $2,000 a month. In BC, Vancouver, rent is up 20% at $2,600 a month. And again, this is just for a one-bedroom apartment. And in Toronto, the other most expensive place to live in Canada, rent is up 23%. The worst part of it is, it used to be that you could just move out of the big cities if you wanted to make your money go further.
So we took the million and we moved up here to the penthouse.
It's the only way to live in Toronto.
Hey, let me show you the balcony. Great view, huh? We don't get this in Lunenburg.
No, we don't.
You gotta be glad you live in Atlantic Canada, where $1 million goes as far as $1 million should.
Oof. Now, I'm not saying Atlantic Canada isn't cheaper to live in than Toronto, but I am saying last year, rent shot up a whopping 32% in the region. Now, why is this happening? Well, during the pandemic, we did see lots of people leaving big provinces in search of, greener, smaller pastures. Almost 100,000 people in the first years of COVID leaving Ontario, just Ontario alone. And when you need to find somewhere to live, you take what you can get, right? The market in Atlantic Canada was just really hot. And with such high demand, prices skyrocketed. Now, another interesting thing, when students started going back to campus for in-class learning, the demand for student housing shot up too, along with rental prices. Here are a few university towns where we saw some of the highest increases. Kitchener, Guelph, Kingston, and in London, Ontario, Western University, rent shot up 32%. And owning a home, it's not exactly achievable for a lot of people these days, right? So there are just generally way more new renters on the market than there are new owners, twice as many over the last decade. So, the demand side of this is easy to understand, right? When there's enough interest, money talks, but this is also sort of a classic case of supply. Put simply, we just don't build enough housing in Canada to match our population growth, and we also don't build it fast enough. And what we are building isn't affordable for many Canadians. That's why there are calls for the government to step in. But government isn't nearly as hands-on as it used to be when it comes to building housing. Back in the 70s, about 40% of housing starts got help from the federal government. By the mid-90s, the feds largely downloaded that responsibility to the provinces and territories and increasingly left the market to sort itself out. And, the best way for a developer to profit in a high-demand market, it ain't to build lots of affordable housing. It's to build lots of expensive housing. And when you're renting a home that's expensive to own, you're effectively splitting the bill with the owner, right? Your rent helps to pay down, their higher down payments, their higher interest rates, their soaring costs. I mean, you get the idea.
I've moved, I've moved 3 times since September. So September, October, November. So 3 times in the past 4 months.
Wow.
Or 3 times in 3 months.
Yeah, wow, indeed. Daniela Qualiera of Toronto. Pretty wild situation. I mean, lots of people struggling out there, right? And we've got Lauren Bird, producer, here on about that.
Producer and Monopoly champion.
I was about to say, how does it feel to have been recently crowned? You must be...
It feels really good. I'm not going to lie. I'll dine out on it for a while.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so we can talk about numbers and facts and figures and data, but at the heart of it, this is a story about people, right? So why don't we start there and what you found?
Yeah, we'll start with Daniela. Yeah. So she's 35 years old, lives in the Toronto area, and what happened to her was just really normal. It's something that would happen to anyone. So she was renting a condo and paying $1,800 a month when last fall her landlord came to her and told her there was going to be a rent increase, and a big one.
I was just like, that's too much. I have a number that I'm comfortable paying for rent so that I can live my life and also save at the same time. And when he told me that he was going to increase the rent by $500 to $2,300, that was just out of my budget. I couldn't say okay.
But wait a second, her landlord wanted to increase the rent from $1,800 to $2,300.
Yeah.
$500 increase.
$500 increase.
How? That's allowed?
Well, I know, right? But in Ontario, rent control isn't an across-the-board thing. So certain units, like basement apartment units, condo units, apartment units, anything that was first rented out after 2018, it doesn't fall under rent control.
Wow, so there are just no rent controls at all. So a $500 increase is
fair game.
Allowed under law.
Yeah,
wow.
And I mean, landlords still have to follow the proper procedure, they have to give you 90 days notice, they have to give you the right paperwork, but ultimately, yeah, that's totally allowed.
But man, that's a big increase for have to deal with, right? With all of her other expenses.
With all of her other expenses, and she's wants to save to buy a home. So if she had to pay that much more of her income on it, it just wouldn't be possible.
Right, because what's the rule of thumb? Is it like a third of your gross income that you're supposed to spend on housing? That's kind of the idea.
It is, and that's the definition. 30% of your income before taxes, that is what's considered affordable. But I think that definition is really starting to feel trite for a lot of people because it's just not the reality, right? And according to the Advocacy Centre for Tenants Ontario, nearly half of tenants in Ontario are paying rents that are considered unaffordable.
Huh. So what happened with Daniela? I mean, she mentioned moving 3 times in the last 4 months. Where'd she end up?
She moved 3 times. So she was in her condo, and then she moved to a temporary place that she managed to find. And she was still looking for somewhere that she could end up long term. And luckily for her, her friend came and said that she could live with him. So she's getting to live with him for free, which is absolutely incredible. And she totally acknowledges that. So she's able to save a bit more.
A huge weight has been lifted off of my shoulders.
Yeah.
Because for so long I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this by myself. And then this was the point where it's okay, I can do it now.
Oh, so that's kind. I mean,
it's very kind.
Very nice that she has someone who can help in that position.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, obviously not everybody has that, right? Not everybody has friends and family that they can lean on. And she, said that one thing she really had to do within herself was learn to take that help, ask for the help and take the help. And I asked her, is this, where you ever imagined you would be?
No, absolutely not. I thought by this time I would have my own place.
Yeah.
100%.
Because it's a logical thing, right?
Yeah. Looking back when I was 25 and I moved out, I was like, oh, it's okay. I'm just living on my own and I'm gonna buy my own place. And then, just things kept increasing and, life changes and it never really goes according to plan anyway. So I've just been going with the flow, even though at some points I'm pulling my hair out and, crying, but I'm still okay, right?
Yeah.
It's just not what I expected.
Okay, so I can see this is hard for her, but
Yeah.
she's putting on a brave face. She's trying to look at it positively.
She's really positive about it. She's made it clear she wasn't complaining, but it's definitely not an ideal situation.
So what's the sort of the takeaway? How we take this individual story and try to extrapolate some bigger meaning here.
Well, I think it's interesting. An expert I spoke with about it said that, as people have to move more and more, as rents become more expensive and they're looking for cheaper places to live, the effect there is that it's really changing communities and neighborhoods, because people who are living in a place short term, they don't invest in that place like they do when they live long term, right? Like things like volunteering or getting involved, they just don't do it in the same way. And so we're starting to see that change happening.
Because there is this sort of increased transience of people, right?
Exactly.
They're moving from place to place, less of a sense of permanence, and that, if I'm understanding you correctly, kind of affects everything about the community, right? Like the way people vote or the way people volunteer, the amount they're willing to invest.
Yeah, exactly. So the ripple effects keep going.
Wow. Okay, you, if I understand correctly, went on a little bit of a field trip?
I went on a field trip, yeah.
Okay, tell me about that, and then we're going to go to commercial break.
Yeah, so we went down into downtown Toronto to meet up with a housing expert from Toronto Metropolitan's School of Urban and Regional Planning. So we're going to put some more questions about this to that expert.
Cool.
Dig a little deeper.